Alright, buckle up because Malcolm-Jamal Warner's story is way more than just a TV role and some applause. Forget the sitcoms, this one begins in Jersey City, New Jersey, where a fierce black mother named her son after two legendary icons. Malcolm X, the unapologetic voice of revolution, and Amayal, the jazz genius who could bend time with his piano. And let me tell you, that name wasn't just for show, it was a declaration. Born on August 18, 1970, Malcolm didn't just enter this world, he was dropped into a legacy. His early years, full of hurdles, resilience, and his mom, Pamela Warner, who was his rock after his parents split. But don't get it twisted, Pamela wasn't just raising a kid, she was nurturing an artist. She saw his potential and said, "Let's take this dream to LA." While other kids were out living carefree lives, Malcolm was in auditions, rehearsing lines, and living in the limelight thanks to Pamela, who stepped up as his manager, protector, and guide in an industry that didn't know what to do with a young, talented black boy who didn't fit the mold. By the time he was 9, he was already performing. And his childhood wasn't about toys, it was about scripts, monologues, and the spotlight. He wasn't just a kid, he was honing a craft that would define his entire life. Malcolm-Jamal Warner was serious from day one, timing, presence, emotional depth. While most kids were busy with toys and cartoons, Malcolm was already learning how to slip into someone else's skin and make it real. He didn't just want to act, he wanted to own his craft. Graduating from the Professional Children's School in New York, a place known for producing artists who lived their craft, he was on a mission for excellence. Not fame, whether it was drama, comedy, music, or spoken word, he always chased depth, constantly pushing for more. That drive would land him the role of a lifetime on The Cosby Show, a career that would span decades. But before the cameras and interviews, it was just a boy, his mom, and a dream. They didn't have everything, but they had each other. And that love and discipline would power everything Malcolm achieved. Malcolm didn't just stumble into greatness, he was prepared for it from day one. While others chased the spotlight, he owned it with quiet power. He didn't need to shout for attention. From the moment he stepped into the role of Theo Huxtable, America watched him grow from a teenager into a man. Theo wasn't just a stereotypical TV son, he was complex, curious, and flawed, making him human. It wasn't just acting, it was a deeper connection with the audience that showed the world what Malcolm-Jamal Warner was truly made of. Malcolm-Jamal Warner brought a subtlety to his role that most young actors could only dream of. It wasn't just about acting, it was about listening, reacting, and making every moment breathe, and the audience felt that. They saw their brothers, sons, and even themselves in him. His role on The Cosby Show turned him into a household name. But Malcolm wasn't interested in just being famous, no. He was after longevity. While some child stars crumbled under the pressure, he leaned into the craft. When the show wrapped in 1992, he deliberately chose to step into roles that challenged him. Even if they weren't glamorous or flashy, he appeared in television dramas, sitcoms, and indie films, showing he wasn't a one-note actor. In the mid-90s, he starred alongside comedian Eddie Griffin in Malcolm and Eddie, a sitcom where he not only showcased his comedic timing, but also took on behind-the-scenes producing duties. He wasn't just a star, he was a storyteller, shaping the narrative and guiding the tone to match his evolving voice. But acting was far from Malcolm's only talent. He was a poet, a musician, and a director. His deep love for spoken word and jazz led him to create electrifying, intimate performances. He played bass guitar, wrote music, and released several albums under his name, albums that blended jazz, soul, and conscious lyrics in a spiritual, thought-provoking way. In 2015, Malcolm added yet another layer to his artistry. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's musical artistry earned him a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Performance, where he collaborated with Robert Glasper Experiment and Lala Hathaway on the track Jesus Children. But his talent didn't stop there. He had a powerful presence in voice acting, lending his deep, commanding voice to iconic educational shows like The Magic School Bus, where he voiced a producer. It's the kind of work that flies under the radar of mainstream audiences, but was a staple for kids growing up in the 90s. His voice became a soundtrack to curiosity and learning. As television evolved, so did Malcolm's roles. He began stepping into more mature, grounded characters in critically acclaimed shows like Sons of Anarchy, American Crime Story, and The Resident. With each role, he brought emotional weight, whether playing a troubled doctor, a conflicted father, or a man struggling with trauma. He wasn't trying to relive his youth. He was embracing the gravity of his age and showing that black men on screen can be complex, vulnerable, strong, angry, and everything in between. Even in his final years, Malcolm kept pushing boundaries. In 2024, he launched the podcast Not All Hood, where he candidly unpacked the challenges facing the Black community. It was a platform for raw, honest conversations, a reflection of the man he was at his core. Off-screen, he mentored young actors, collaborated with musicians, and remained deeply involved in artistic communities, especially in Atlanta, where he'd settled with his family. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's career was never just about acting. It was about leaving a legacy of truth, creativity, and impact. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's life wasn't a sprint. It was a journey, and no single role could define him. He built a legacy, brick by brick. Not for the applause, but for the impact. Every line he spoke, every note he played, every story he chose to tell his art lived in all of it. Malcolm didn't just survive Hollywood, he mastered it on his own terms, and in doing so, he gave an entire generation permission to grow, evolve, and create fearlessly. But on July 20th, 2025, Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death hit like a ton of bricks sudden and gut-wrenching. At just 54, the man who had crafted one of the most respected careers in television, music, and poetry lost his life on what was meant to be a peaceful family vacation. He was in Costa Rica, with his wife and daughter, staying at a quiet resort near Piacos, a beautiful yet notoriously unpredictable beach on the country's Caribbean coast. That afternoon, Malcolm decided to take a swim. The sky was clear, and the ocean looked deceptively calm, but underneath, a deadly rip current was quietly building, powerful enough to take even experienced swimmers by surprise. Witnesses said he was pulled further and further from shore, trapped in the violent grip of the water. People rushed in to help, eventually pulling him back to land. Paramedics from Costa Rica's Red Cross arrived swiftly and started CPR, trying desperately to revive him. But by then, the current had already claimed him. Malcolm never regained consciousness. He never regained consciousness. Moments later, he was declared dead at the scene. The official cause of death, as confirmed by Costa Rican authorities, was asphyxiation due to drowning. The news of Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death spread like wildfire, leaving many in utter disbelief. For decades, Malcolm had been a constant, steady presence in entertainment, always carrying himself with quiet dignity. Never in the tabloids, never chasing fame, he was focused solely on his craft. He had evolved from a teen star to a grounded, multi-talented artist who valued privacy, integrity, and purpose. At the time of his passing, he was still actively contributing to the industry, working on a podcast that delved into the complex issues affecting the Black community. He was also enjoying the joys of fatherhood and married life roles he protected from public view but spoke of with deep love. When asked, perhaps the most touching tribute came from Bill Cosby, who said, "Malcolm's death felt like losing my own son." That statement captured what many who worked with Malcolm already knew: he wasn't just admired. He was loved. His death wasn't just the loss of a familiar face on screen. It was the loss of a soul that quietly poured itself into generations of art, conversation, and culture. At 54, Malcolm still had so much left to say, to write, and to create. But even in the final chapter of his life, he was doing what he always did, making time for his family, seeking peace, and staying grounded in a real life far removed from the noise of Hollywood. His untimely passing serves as a painful reminder of how fragile and unpredictable life truly is. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's legacy will live on in every role he played, every lyric he wrote, and every person he inspired. He was never the type of celebrity who chased headlines or craved fame. Forget flashy luxury or stirring up controversy. Malcolm chose a quieter road, where his work spoke louder than any personal drama. For years, he kept his most sacred relationships away from the cameras and gossip columns, not because he had something to hide, but because he believed some things were simply meant to be protected. Family, for Malcolm, wasn't just a part of life, it was the core of who he was. His most defining relationship was with his mother, Pamela Warner. She wasn't just his parent, she was his first manager, his fiercest advocate, and his rock. Pamela was the one who saw his talent, moved with him to Los Angeles, and stayed by his side as he rose to fame. Their bond was unshakable. She taught him about professionalism, resilience, and knowing his worth, lessons that would guide him through every season of his life. Even as Malcolm became a star on The Cosby Show, his mother's influence kept him grounded. But in matters of love, Malcolm experienced both deep joy and quiet heartbreak. One of the most meaningful relationships in his life was with actress Michelle Thomas, who played Justine, Theo's girlfriend on The Cosby Show. Off-screen, their connection blossomed into something real. They were young, talented, and in love, but that love was tested in the most painful way. Michelle was diagnosed with cancer, and Malcolm stood by her side until her final days. She passed away in 1998, and though Malcolm rarely spoke about the grief, those close to him said he never fully got over her. Losing her left a permanent scar, deepening his compassion and his understanding of life's fragility after Michelle's death. Malcolm dated actress Cara Melina White for over 7 years. They never married, but in interviews, Cara described him as a thoughtful, sensitive partner, someone deeply committed to authenticity. Years later, Malcolm-Jamal Warner found love again with award-winning actress Regina King. Their relationship captivated fans who admired both stars for their incredible talent and grace. But just as quietly as it had begun, it ended. No messy drama, no tabloid fodder, just mutual respect. Malcolm never aired his personal life, even when he could have used it to stay in the spotlight. In the ever-hungry world of celebrity gossip. Then, around 2017, things changed. No grand announcements, no paparazzi shots. Malcolm got married. The identity of his wife was kept private, a decision they both made, one they respected together. They had a daughter, his only child. From that moment, Malcolm began pulling back even more from the limelight, focusing entirely on fatherhood. He once said in an interview that becoming a father was the most profound experience of his life, reshaping the way he viewed everything, even his career. Friends described Malcolm as the kind of dad who read bedtime stories in funny voices, made up songs, and prioritized family meals over Hollywood parties. They lived in Atlanta, far from the chaos of Los Angeles, in a home that became their sanctuary. Neighbors often described Malcolm as warm but reserved, seen jogging in the mornings, picking up groceries, and taking his daughter to school. He didn't want to be a star there. He wanted to be a husband, a father, a man at peace. His home was filled with music, books, and laughter, a place where creativity and love thrived. Not for an audience, but for the people who truly mattered to him. Even as he continued working, appearing in television dramas, directing, producing music, and launching a podcast, he kept his family out of the spotlight. For Malcolm, privacy wasn't secrecy, it was protection. As he once said, "Everything the public needs to know about me, they can find in my work." But the man behind the roles was someone only a few truly knew. When he passed, tributes came pouring in from all directions, tributes poured in from fans and peers alike. But the most emotional words came from those who knew Malcolm-Jamal Warner. In his quiet, private life, the ones who saw him not as Theo or a celebrity, but as a present, loving father and a devoted husband. His family was the heart of who he was, and in the end, it was in that sacred circle, his wife, his daughter, and the peace they built together, that meant more to him than anything fame could offer. Malcolm-Jamal Warner lived a life that many in Hollywood quietly envied, not because it was loud or drenched in luxury, but because it was balanced. He did what few child stars ever manage. He grew up with grace, transitioned with purpose, and lived with clarity about who he was and what truly mattered. His lifestyle reflected that. It wasn't about extravagance or excess. It was about intention, artistry, and peace. From a young age, Malcolm understood the volatility of fame. Thrust into the spotlight at just 14 with his role as Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, he saw firsthand how success could devour people. So, he made a quiet vow to himself to never let fame own him. That promise shaped every aspect of his life. While many of his peers were chasing endorsements, partying in clubs, or stretching themselves thin for more exposure, Malcolm chose roles that spoke to his soul. He was curating his career with care, not chasing trends. He didn't live in Beverly Hills. He didn't spend weekends on yachts or flood his social media with. Malcolm-Jamal Warner never bought into the Hollywood lifestyle. After some time in Los Angeles, he made the bold move to Atlanta, a city known for its rich Black culture, slower pace, and thriving artistic community. He bought a home there, not for the cameras, but for his family. It wasn't about square footage or status, it was about comfort, creativity, and calm. His house was filled with books, musical instruments, journals, and poetry. It was the kind of space where you could sit in silence and still feel surrounded by meaning. Malcolm was a deeply introspective man. He practiced mindfulness, read philosophy, studied jazz, and often stayed up late writing spoken word pieces. His mornings were purposeful: coffee, music, maybe a workout, or a walk through the neighborhood. He cherished cooking, parenting, journaling, and rehearsing lines in the quiet corners of his home studio. His lifestyle wasn't centered around red carpets or premieres. It was about art, family, and depth. Financially, Malcolm was in a strong position, not because he flaunted wealth, but because he managed it wisely. While exact figures were never confirmed, entertainment analysts and industry insiders estimate his net worth to have been between $10 million and $20 million at the time of his passing. This wasn't surprising, given his decades-long career. The Cosby Show was one of the highest-rated sitcoms of its era, and Malcolm earned not only fame but healthy residuals from his long-running role. His income didn't stop with syndication. Malcolm-Jamal Warner had steady roles in multiple successful television series after The Cosby Show, including Malcolm and Eddie, Read Between the Lines, The Resident, Sons of Anarchy, and 911. He worked consistently in television for over 35 years, a rare feat in Hollywood, but his talents didn't end there. He earned directing credits, produced indie projects, and lent his voice to beloved animated and educational series, including The Magic School Bus, which brought in royalties for years. Beyond TV and film, he was a respected musician. Malcolm played bass guitar professionally and released multiple spoken-word jazz fusion albums. His Grammy win in 2015 only cemented his status as a serious artist, not just an actor who dabbled in music, but a musician in his own right. He also made income through poetry performances, speaking engagements, and later through his podcast, Not All Hood, where he tackled complex conversations about Black identity, culture, and healing. But Malcolm's podcast didn't just generate income, it became another platform for him to express who he truly was: thoughtful, measured, and deeply concerned with how Black men are perceived in the world. He never let wealth define him. There were no headlines about lavish spending or financial collapse. Instead, he invested in himself, his family, and causes close to his heart. He mentored young actors, supported arts programs, and was known to quietly help struggling artists get their first break. In a notoriously unstable industry, he stood as a symbol of consistency. What made Malcolm-Jamal Warner's lifestyle so unique was its intentional simplicity. In an industry obsessed with image, he chose authenticity. In a world consumed by noise, he embraced stillness. His wealth wasn't just measured in dollars. It was found in the life he built, the peace he protected, the art he created, and the daughter he adored. Malcolm didn't live to impress strangers, he lived to express truth. And in doing so, he carved out a life that many dream of but few are brave enough to live. Brave enough to live.